Bueno, gracias por poder estar aquí, un poco contándoles lo que está ocurriendo en Ecuador en relación al tema del Yasuní.
Thank you for being here. We're here to tell you a little bit about what is going on in Ecuador related to the topic of the Yasuní.
Gracias a la traductora también, que nos apoya.
Thank you to the interpreter who's helping us.
Y bueno, yo como dijo Mariano, soy de Quito, Ecuador, de la capital del Ecuador, y soy parte de un colectivo feminista y parte de YASunidos, que es, bueno, ya les vamos a contar un poco más de qué se trata. Eso.
So, as Mariana said, I am from Quito, the capital of Ecuador. I am part of a feminist collective and also part of the YASunidos, and we are here to talk a little bit about that.
Hello, my name is Cerda. I'm from the Ecuadorian Amazon, as Mariana said already. I'm a full-time campaigner for Amazon Watch, and I'm also part of the YASunidos collective. Gaby and I have been on tour talking to a couple coalitions, universities, and students all over, like California, and before that, I was part of the YASunidos delegation that went to the New York Climate March, and yeah, it's been amazing since the time. Like I've been here connecting with a lot of social movements, all that are doing a lot of work in their local places.
No sé si todas las personas que estamos aquí conocen un poco del Ecuador, del Yasuní.
I don't know if those of you who are here, if you know something about Ecuador, know something about Yasuní.
No sé mucho.
Ya. Entonces, sí, para empezar un poco contando la historia de este lugar, Yasuní es un parque nacional.
So we'll start off by giving you a little bit of history about the place. Yasuní is a national park.
También es un territorio que fue declarado reserva de la biosfera y además es un lugar en donde habitan pueblos indígenas en aislamiento voluntario, es decir, hay una zona denominada intangible donde habitan estos pueblos.
That area has been named a biosphere reserve, and it's also a place where there are communities of indigenous people living in voluntary isolation. It's called the intangible zone, where those communities live.
Y es en este territorio, o inspiradas en este territorio, que desde los inicios de los años 90 se empieza a pensar en una propuesta para transformar el modelo capitalista que depende tanto de la extracción petrolera como es la de dejar el petróleo bajo tierra en el Yasuní.
So that territory, or inspired by that area, we started in the 90s, began thinking about a way to create another model besides that of capitalism to perhaps avoid the extraction of oil from that area. In other words, some way to be able to leave the oil in the ground.
Esta propuesta surge también porque en el Ecuador, a partir de los años 60, se da paso a la extracción petrolera, sobre todo en el norte de la Amazonía ecuatoriana, en donde opera la empresa Texaco.
So this proposal was put forth because in Ecuador, starting in the 60s, Ecuador was open to oil extraction, and especially in the northern Amazon region by the oil company called Texaco.
Y esta empresa ocasionó uno de los desastres ambientales más graves en el mundo y que obviamente han afectado gravemente a la población, a la población humana, ¿no? A más de a la naturaleza.
And this company, their work led to a huge environmental disaster there, particularly on the population that lives there and on the human beings that are there.
Esta historia lamentable creó el precedente para que las comunidades afectadas por la explotación petrolera se organicen para denunciar a la empresa Texaco. Es un caso que ya lleva varias décadas hasta la actualidad de denuncia a esta empresa.
So because of that history, unfortunately, it led to a precedent, and these communities have had to file a legal complaint to sue Texaco, and that case has been going on for decades now, and is still not finished.
Pero esto precisamente generó la fuerza para que las personas de diversos sectores empiecen a pensar, a construir, a dar luz, a sembrar las semillas de esta propuesta de dejar el petróleo bajo tierra en el Yasuní. Vuelvo al Yasuní.
But that precisely is what led to this proposal that people from different sectors began thinking about some way to construct or to bring to life some way to leave the oil in the ground, especially in Yasuní, and that brings me back to talking about Yasuní.
Y a lo largo de los años, hasta el año 2007, se realizaron muchas campañas desde diversos sectores, sobre todo de ONGs en el Ecuador, para promover la idea, esta iniciativa por el Yasuní.
So during the course of time, up till 2007, there were a lot of different campaigns among different sectors of the society, especially from NGOs in Ecuador, trying to develop this proposal of leaving the oil in the ground in Yasuní.
Una pequeña parte de la sociedad civil en Ecuador nos empezamos a sumar a esta idea y empezamos a informarnos y a organizar charlas, espacios de diálogo y de información en relación a la propuesta del Yasuní.
So some part of us in civil society in El Salvador, a small group of us, we began...
Ecuador.
I'm sorry, thank you very much. Ecuador. We began joining into that idea and finding ways to provide information, to have talks, to have places where people could have dialogues about this proposal for leaving the oil in Yasuní.
Y es en el año 2007 cuando esta propuesta tiene una mejor estructura porque desde esta demanda social llega también a espacios académicos y empieza a generarse una propuesta mucho más estructurada y el presidente Rafael Correa, que llega en el 2007, la lanza al mundo.
So in 2007, that proposal began to develop much more form and structure because due to the demand from society, the academy began to become involved, and academicians began to provide more structure. And President Rafael Correa, who came into office in 2007, then decided to launch that proposal.
Esto ocasionó que mucha gente alrededor del mundo y sobre todo en el país se sumen en mayor número a esta causa, a esta idea de dejar el petróleo bajo tierra, creyendo que si un gobierno asume una idea así es más posible que llegue a ocurrir que el petróleo se quede bajo tierra.
So that led to a lot of people around the world, and especially in the country, also joining into that idea, because if the government is willing to consider leaving the oil into the ground, then it may very well be possible that it really could happen, that the oil could be left underground.
Y de esta manera muchas organizaciones sociales, colectivos, personas, seguimos sosteniendo, durante estos años hemos sostenido diversas actividades, espacios de reflexión, espacios de acción para defender la propuesta de dejar el petróleo bajo tierra en el Yasuní, porque también este territorio se convirtió en un referente de defensa de la vida, de defensa de otras posibilidades de vivir y de construir el mundo.
So there were many organizations, many collectives, lots of people who we began to really support this idea. We had lots of activities, places for people to reflect and think about it, places for people to do actions to defend this proposal of leaving the oil underground. And what it really led to in this area is it became a kind of a defense of life. It was another way to try to live and to try to build our lives.
Y es en estos momentos cuando también desde los espacios feministas empezamos a hacer más visible cómo el modelo extractivista petrolero responde a un pensamiento jerárquico, patriarcal, que genera una serie de desigualdades en los territorios donde extrae el petróleo, pero además en todo el proceso donde el petróleo está presente.
So this also led to the feminists, a feminist movement beginning to think a little bit more about what the oil extraction industry really meant. It's a hierarchical process. It's a very patriarchal process, and it really leads to a lot of inequality in the area where oil is being extracted, and particularly the process by which oil is extracted.
Por ejemplo, se ha identificado que en todos los lugares donde hay procesos de extractivismo petrolero, y esto también se reproduce para temas mineros y otros, se requiere que ingresen fuerzas militares a los territorios para controlar a las comunidades, a las poblaciones.
So, for example, they were able to identify that in all the places where this oil extraction process was going on, and this also applies to mining and other extractive industries, that they needed to have military presence in the area to help control the population, to control the communities.
Es una actividad que es básicamente, principalmente masculina. Los trabajadores petroleros son principalmente hombres. Los trabajadores del gobierno que llegan a hacer estos diálogos con las comunidades son principalmente hombres.
And it's an activity that's basically a masculine activity. The people who are working on the oil wells are men. The people working for the government who come out to have dialogues with the communities are also men.
Y el problema no es que sean hombres, el problema es que tienen una identidad masculina que llega para dominar, para apropiarse de los recursos que...
And the problem isn't that they're men. It's rather that it's a very masculine identity. They come to the areas to dominate. They come to take resources out of territories. It's a very masculine, extractive kind of mentality.
Y lo que es evidente también, y lo que dicen las mujeres amazónicas que ahora también se están levantando para decir no queremos petróleo en nuestros territorios, es que todo este grupo de trabajadores que van para extraer petróleo llegan siempre a dialogar con los hombres de las comunidades. Es un diálogo entre hombres, es un diálogo masculino. Entonces eso genera desigualdad en las comunidades porque quienes terminan decidiendo sobre la comunidad son los hombres que tienen este diálogo con hombres, ¿no?
So it became evident, and women in the Amazon began talking about this, that when the women began saying, we do not want oil extraction in our territory, because the workers who would come to take the oil out, when they came, they would have dialogues with the community, but they would only talk with the men. And so these little dialogues, man-to-man dialogues, and so that led to a lot of inequality in the community because the people who made the decisions about what was going to happen to the community were the men talking with other men.
Y bueno, esto se reproduce en otros espacios donde la explotación petrolera o donde los negocios petroleros se desarrollan, ¿no? Es decir, quiénes son los empresarios petroleros, cuáles son las intenciones, con quién negocia dentro del gobierno. Y esto lo hemos ido analizando, evidenciando y dialogando con otros espacios, otras compañeras también, mujeres.
So this is being reproduced in other areas, not only oil extraction, but among the business people who are working in the oil business development, the people who work in the companies, what their intention may be, the people who are having dealings with government agents. So we've begun to really analyze and collect evidence to see what is going on, and particularly the women. We are the ones who are beginning to collect evidence about this.
Esta es una reflexión a la cual nos llevó el tema del Yasuní. Lamentablemente, la presencia petrolera siempre ha estado presente y parece que seguirá presente en el Ecuador y en muchas partes del mundo, y en el año 2013 el presidente Rafael Correa decide explotar el petróleo del Yasuní.
So these were reflections because of what was going on in Yasuní, and unfortunately the presence of oil will continue. The oil extraction presence will continue in El Salvador and in other parts of the world.
Ecuador.
I'm sorry. Ecuador and in other parts of the world. But in 2013, President Rafael Correa decided that he was going to go ahead with oil extraction in Yasuní.
Y así nos dimos cuenta que el gobierno, aunque coloca un discurso supuestamente distinto, progresista, por otro lado siempre mantiene esta otra cara de continuar reproduciendo el mismo modelo, solo que ahora tienen otras estrategias de generar apoyo social. Y el tema del Yasuní hizo que este apoyo social deje de existir, este apoyo social, porque él hizo que una iniciativa que tenía muchísimo apoyo y con el cual teníamos muchas esperanzas de empezar un camino de transformación, se cayó, se disolvió.
So we realized that the government, even if they were talking about things a little differently, even if they were a little bit progressive, there was always the other side of the coin. They had another face where they really were just continuing with the same model as before, but with a slightly different strategy and different ways of generating public support. But with the issue of Yasuní, they lost some of that because there was so much support for the proposal to not take oil out of the ground, and then when that hope that they had to not extract oil didn't come to pass, they lost a lot of public support.
Y es ahí cuando empiezan a nacer YASunidos, y luego les va a contar un poco más.
And that's how YASunidos began to be born, and Leo will tell you something about that.
Yeah, as Gaby mentioned, the ITT initiative, which was to protect and leave the oil in the ground for in this area of the Yasuní National Park. ITT stands for Espingo Tambococha Tiputini, which is this remote area inside the Yasuní National Park. In Ecuador, like the government came to power, Rafael Correa was elected president in 2006, so he started in power in 2007. And right after that, he decided to go with the ITT initiative, and 6 years later, the 15th of August 2013, he decided to cancel the ITT initiative and go with the Plan B, which meant the drilling of this area in the Ecuadorian Amazon. When he decided this, a lot of the civil society movement from people from a lot of different spaces, people from different spaces, like feminist groups, the GLBT community, the indigenous movements, a lot of these groups that were organized already, and a lot of people that just were not organized yet, but they wanted to have their voice heard. You know, they went out on the streets, they protest, we went on riots, and this is how we were born, basically. A lot of the people who were in the streets chanting and saying to the government that they are not the solemn power in Ecuador that can decide over the futures that we want to live. So we basically formed YASunidos as a collective of collectives. We wanted to have our voices heard in the decision-making process of the future that we want to live on an issue of national interest, which is to leave or not the oil in the ground. So we decided to go within the Ecuadorian system. There was an article in the Ecuadorian Constitution, the 167, that allowed any Ecuadorian, that gave the right to any Ecuadorian to call out for a national referendum if you gather 5% of the electorate, like 5% signatures of the national electorate. So we started this process of gathering the signatures. We use a lot of different ways to gather the signatures. We use a lot of theater, a lot of arts, music, in order to be involved with the civil society itself. You know, we had a lot of volunteers. People volunteered themselves to go out on the streets and collect the signatures. We had only 6 months to gather 585,000 signatures that we needed to continue with the process to call out for a national referendum. We gathered 800,000 plus signatures, and this meant that a lot of the civil society became organized, and it was a powerful moment for organized civil society in Ecuador. The government, right after we started the process, right at the beginning, the president said, "Okay, you three hippies or you through infantile ecologists, go and get the signatures if you can." So we did. You know, we went out on the streets, we gathered the signatures, we established a debate in the streets, and that was and then was where we got the support from Ecuadorian society in general. Polls before we started collecting the signatures said that 70% of Ecuadorians wanted to be consulted on this issue of a national matter. Right after we started the process to get the signatures, the government started a systematic repression system for the YASunidos collective itself. We were not allowed to get signatures in public spaces. We were banned for public spaces. We were banned from the local the Ecuadorian state has bought local television, and they use all their media to harass the people in the collective. So it is said that they spend more than $5 million in communications, and they even launched two alternative consultations, two alternative process to collect signatures to call for their own referendum. Our question for the YASunidos was, do you want to keep the oil in the ground, yes or not? to keep the oil in the ground in the ITT area, yes or not? And the government launched two other alternative call-outs for referendum. And one of their questions was, do you want to exploit all the oil in the Yasuní, yes or not? The other one was, do you want to extract the oil in the Yasuní if the affectation will be 1 in 1,000? You know, and they use a lot of the power, a lot of their machinery, like the government apparatus in order to get their way. In Ecuador, we don't have autonomous Congress or judiciary system or courts. We don't have any autonomy in that. The president himself said on his address to Ecuadorians that he has on Saturdays that the executive power is the one who runs all the powers, you know, and nobody really says anything. And the YASunidos collective brought all this inquiries of the public, of the civil society, to decide on whether or not they want to drill the oil from the Yasuní. And this represents the decision over the future. This represents all the fights that were going on in the jungle, in the Amazon. The fights, the collected fights, coming from the leaders and from the struggles of the Amazon, directly breaching and linking to the people in the cities. It was the first time that we got people from both places chanting for the environment itself. Or YASunidos became this reference for the fight to life. You know, you want to defend life, vote for Yasuní. We needed to keep the oil in the ground. A lot of a lot of the people in the cities started saying, and then started making the connection with the Amazon. They started saying, we also breathe the air from the Yasuní. We also breathe the air from the Amazon. So this was very interesting. Coming from, I come from a small town in the Amazon, and we always thought, like we the indigenous people thought that the struggles of the Amazon are a local struggle. You know, we usually thought that, and we always knew that we were in the front lines on fighting climate change. But now this issue of the Yasuní as a representation, as a reference, brought all the people from like the struggles in the Amazon and the cities together to say, okay, all the impacts on the planet, all the impacts on the Amazon will be problematic, like for people in the Amazon, for people in the cities as well. So we have a link in, and we don't feel alone anymore. You know, we feel like we are part of a national movement. We feel part that we are a global movement, and that is what YASunidos represent. You know, YASunidos represent a national platform in which we can make our voices heard, and like we need to have a say in the future that we want to have. Oil industry has always been saying that they will bring the indigenous people out of poverty, and that is not it. If you go to the Amazon, you see the community that had oil industry in the area. They're the most poor, and their rights have been violated. So we need to figure out a way to go beyond capitalist system. We needed to figure out alternatives, and this is what Yasuní represented to a lot of the indigenous population, a lot of the Ecuadorians that were fighting for the life in Yasuní. It represents a new way, a new concept of understanding the world and saying, okay, the way we have been living up until now is not working. It's just not working anymore, or it never has. So we need to find a way to go beyond capitalist system. And this is how YASunidos got all the Ecuadorian civil society support in general. The Ecuadorian government basically banned the signatures that we got it. They invalidated. Our signatures had to be validated by the Ecuadorian National Electoral College. And even before they validated, the president of the Electoral College said that the affectation in the Yasuní will be 1 in 1,000. So he didn't know why we were protesting. And that gave Ecuadorians the notion that he was totally against it, and he was supposed to be, autonomous and just do what he's supposed to do, verify the signatures and go with the process or not. And they banned our signatures, they banned our process, but that really gave us more legitimacy within Ecuador and among a lot of the civil society movements. So we exhausted our legal resources in Ecuador because there's no autonomy, so we're denouncing the fraud made by the government in Ecuador with the process of our signatures. And the political participation, which is a legal right for every Ecuadorian, is the freedom of speech. We need to decide over our futures, and we use a tool within the government, and we were not given that right, and our right and our voices and what we wanted was not respected. So we exhausted our legal possibilities in Ecuador, and now we're taking the case to the International Commission on Human Rights in Washington, D.C. I was in D.C. 2 weeks ago, and we met with some officials of the International Commission on Human Rights. And then we got a special hearing for the 27th of October to talk about political participation, the rights of nature, and political participation and people living in voluntary isolation in Ecuador. So while we have that, we're going to use that momentum and present the petition that collects all the information that we gathered from the process and why and that collects why our rights have been neglected, our political rights have been neglected in Ecuador. So we're going to present the petition on the 27th and call out for the international for the Commission on Human Rights and tell them to act. We need the international community to be aware of what is going on in Ecuador. Our group has become stronger. This is our international case, but also we're strengthening our group within Ecuador, within our local groups. We have local groups all over Ecuador, and we're starting a campaign of training activists, to training people with their rights, to training people about the environmental issues, social justice, climate justice, all those tools that we need to know to act and to take action in Ecuador and to create a sustainable process and to keep using this platform that YASunidos has created as a voice of civil society in Ecuador. That's where we're at right now in Ecuador. And thank you.
We have time for questions if anyone wants to ask.
I have a question. I know that Ecuador has a big debt with China, and that they're supposed to pay part of that debt in crude oil. What can we, as the international community, do to have any kind of influence at all on the policies of the Ecuadorian government in relation to its oil dealings with China and other big powers? Yo sé que Ecuador tiene una deuda con China que va a pagar una parte de esa deuda en el petróleo, y qué podemos nosotros hacer como la comunidad internacional para presionar de alguna manera al presidente de Ecuador en su relación con China y los otros países grandes.
Pues creo que lo importante ahora es seguir sosteniendo la propuesta de dejar el petróleo bajo tierra, y incluso para nosotros en Ecuador es complicado mirar completamente a las corporaciones chinas porque tienen otra estrategia de operación en el país.
I think it's important to continue pressing this proposal to leave the oil in the ground, but we in Ecuador We also see that this is a very complicated situation because we can see that China's corporate perspective, they just have like a completely different way of working in our country.
Creo que ahora lo importante en este tiempo es denunciar todo lo que está ocurriendo. Ya hay estudios en Ecuador de cómo operan las empresas chinas y cuáles son las relaciones con el gobierno y podemos difundirlas y visibilizar todo lo que está ocurriendo, ¿no? Porque es importante analizar cómo ahora hay un cambio a nivel global de los poderes, de las fuerzas, y ahora China es un actor sumamente importante en América Latina.
I think it's really important to continue to speak out against what is happening. There are studies going on now to see how the companies that are Chinese are in our country, how they relate to the government, to make it, to spread that information, to make what's happening more visible to the rest of the world. And I think it's really important to analyze the global power shifts that we're seeing now. China right now is extremely important in Latin America.
The problem with China goes beyond that. You know, in Ecuador, we wanted to. The government really wanted to be away from the imperialist model that said the IMF, the World Bank, had in other Latin America. And it said, okay, we're going to change our economy to the knowledge-based economy, the Ecuadorian knowledge-based economy, going from the extractivism era to this new era of knowledge. And in order to do that, the plan in Ecuador is to change the productive matrix. You know, and changing the productive matrix means doing major changes in the production of energy and the production of refinery and the changing all the energy sources in Ecuador. And it needs money. The Ecuadorian government needs money in order to do that. The problem is that we don't have any money and we don't have any power towards our monetary policy in Ecuador. Ecuador became dollarized in 2000, 1999, 2000 with President Jamil Mawad. And right after we started using the US dollar as our national currency, we don't have any voice, any say on the monetary policies. So we depend solely on the US. And we cannot default, we cannot do anything, basically. And for this new project that the government wants to do now to change the productive matrix, we needed a lot of money. And nobody really wanted to lend us money, not the IMF, the World Bank, or the usual lenders, you know. And even after that, we defaulted on our bonds, on our credits to the international community. So we did not have any possibilities to get access to loans, and the only way we could have access to like cash was through China. So China comes in as a new power, as this new creditor to Ecuador, and establish the rules, the new conditions, you know, of Ecuador. So now Ecuador gets the money that they need to this welfare progressive socialist era that the government is giving to Ecuadorians and saying, okay, we want to be, in order to be portrayed into power, and in order to keep existing as a solid power in Ecuador, we need to show the people that we're doing progress, that we're doing projects. So it asks money from China to do this like mega projects in Ecuador. And even there, we will not be making any money because we need a lot of money, and we are selling our oil to China already. We cannot pay back in dollars, in currency. We cannot pay back in cash. The only way we can pay that back, those loans, are through oil resources, through like net oil. And we are accounting that the present oil in current prices, not in prices in the next 5 years when the actual oil is gonna come out of the ground. And another of the conditions that China is putting in Ecuador is that we need to use Chinese corporations. And then there's the dilemma. The Chinese government lends us the money through the China National Bank. And then Ecuadorians receive and they need to hire Chinese companies. And we're used to deal with like corporations like Chevron, Texaco, Occidental, and the way they operate is very westernized. And we really don't know how the Chinese companies work. And now that these corporations are part of the government as well, the Chinese government. And we already, in Ecuador, we already kicked out some oil companies out of Ecuador. So now the national Ecuadorian oil company, Petroamazonas, is merged with foreign investment, and they're the ones who will be drilling in Ecuador. So if we as activists say something about the Ecuadorian companies, will be set aside and put us as terrorists, environmental terrorists. The Ecuadorian government just changed the whole the penal code in order to criminalize protests. So there is not many things that we can do in Ecuador. We cannot even protest outside embassies anymore in Ecuador. So now we're developing a strategy towards like lobbying and working with Chinese corporations. We're lobbying with NGOs and representatives in China, and we might even send a delegation towards China. So we just created a discussion group about Chinese investments in Latin America, and we're like right now we're just strategizing because it's a new phenomenon. It's a new way that we need to like rethink the way we work with China, because they don't even have any regulations. They might, but they will not respect regulations usually. And we don't really think that they would care about what the international community says. So it's the merging of new powers and the merging of new corporations is the new ways that this capitalist model is working, So we're in there.
Había otra pregunta.
Thank you so much for both of you for your
Muchas gracias a
presentation.
ambos por su presentación.
I have a comment and
Tengo un
a
comentario
question.
y una pregunta.
My comment is the
El
following.
comentario es el siguiente.
I'm from Africa, from
Soy
East
de
Africa.
África, del este de
The
África.
impact of the Chinese
El
investment in
impacto de
Africa is
inversión
unprecedented.
chino
It's larger
en
than Latin America.
África
And I see
tiene
the problematic
precedente y
area that you
veo
mentioned.
los problemas que
But
está
one of the things I'm a researcher.
Realmente,
I research in corporate ethics and in the context of climate change and food systems. So one of the things we face as social movement, indigenous people, people of the margin, people who are outside the developed area, is what models that we want to develop in order to counter the argument of the capitalist neoliberal systems. So how we do that? What proposal do we have? How we preserve the environment and the climate change? So I'm struggling to understand that what the Ecuadorian Yasuní collective and social movement proposing, what the best way for Ecuador going out of this. We can protest a particular mode of development, in quotation, but what do both of you propose? What is its alternative? In my observation, I'm an outsider. In my observation, that it seems to me that the government of Korea is more progressive, leaning toward South-South relationship. So this is my observation from outside. As a person who lives in the United States for over a decade, I see also the brutality of the capitalist system of the United States, manipulated by media of the United States, either within the research academia in the United States, that to dehumanize the attempts of
humanista,
Latin American leaders to do differently as it did in Africa, in the Middle East,
propuestas de
in
los
Central
líderes
Asia.
latinoamericanos para hacer algo
I
diferente
really-
de lo que hicieron en África, en Asia.
I struggle with the context that, with the idea that in Ecuador there is no separation between the executive branch and the judiciary and the Congress. I'm struggling with that notion. I would love you to give me more elaborate on that. And also, I'm very familiar with Ecuador. I started my first activism in Amazon Watch, in the Amazon in Ecuador, prior to Korea, when the time was uglier. So my question will be the following. If we leave, which I'm with, we leave the oil in Yasuní intact, what the social movement in Ecuador right now proposing the way out of developing and protecting social gains in the era of Korea. I'm very familiar with his attempt in educational system, healthcare systems, and redeveloping the country in very particular different way. Can we trust the International Monetary Fund and World Bank just to get some loans? The last 50 years was disastrous, the next 100 years will be even worse. Can we build a different relationship with corporate control? Chinese corporate control by the Chinese government, because the Chinese government is a neoliberalist government, we know that. Do they have a different code ethics? I researched the Chinese cooperation very well. The only cooperation in the world, actually, you can sue them in their country is the
So
Chinese.
maybe we could go straight to our question. We are running out of time.
That's my question.
Okay, yeah, so would you like to answer?
Sí, tener una respuesta que haga frente al modelo capitalista es bastante complejo porque no podemos cambiar un modelo por otro similar pero con diferentes características, ¿no?
Well, to answer that, you have to confront, you're talking about confronting a capitalist model, and you can't just change it to another model that's similar but with some other characteristics.
La iniciativa Yasuní TT era una clara propuesta para encaminar al Ecuador y ser un ejemplo para el mundo, para empezar un camino de transformación.
And the Yasuní ITT proposal was a very clear proposal to set Ecuador on a different road to begin to lead it to a new transformation.
Porque era una propuesta que intentaba, bueno, se construyó un fideicomiso, no sé.
It was a proposal, well, we created a trust fund.
Para que los países del norte global, los países industrializados, den una compensación económica al Ecuador por dejar el petróleo bajo tierra.
So we created a trust fund so that the countries of the global north, the industrial countries, could provide, give money to Ecuador to compensate them for leaving the oil in the ground.
Esto como un proceso de justicia ambiental también.
That was also a kind of environmental justice system as well.
Obviamente la idea era evitar que la idea del Yasuní entre al mercado de carbono porque tampoco queremos un capitalismo verde.
And obviously this was an idea to also try to avoid having Yasuní enter in the carbon market because we're trying to have a green solution.
Y esa era la oportunidad para que el gobierno se dirija a los países que más contaminan y pueda dialogar para obtener este dinero y así empezar en Ecuador un proceso de transformación, iniciar el proceso de transformación.
So this was an opportunity by the government. He directed himself to those countries that are the countries that do most of the contamination, to give them an opportunity to contribute funds to try to begin to get Ecuador on this road to transformation. This was an attempt to start that transformation.
Esto sumado a tener una constitución que apoya los derechos de la naturaleza y que es realmente progresista en ese entonces, más el apoyo social, era algo que podía ser posible para transformar el modelo.
So if you add to that the fact that we have a constitution which protects the rights of nature, which actually is a proposition that's very progressive, and when you consider the social support that we also had, we really considered that it might be possible to begin to transform this model.
Lamentablemente, siempre los poderes capitalistas, los poderes petroleros son mucho más fuertes, y a la vez en la que Rafael Correa decide asumir la iniciativa Yasuní TT, también a la vez decide asumir el plan B, que es la explotación petrolera en caso de que no se pueda sacar adelante la iniciativa Yasuní TT.
So unfortunately, the capitalist and oil company powers are much stronger than that. And also, Rafael Correa, although he accepted the Yasuní ITT proposal, at the same time he also maintained a plan B that if he didn't get the support to not extract the oil, that he would go ahead with oil extraction.
Y lamentablemente, con el paso del tiempo, el gobierno de Rafael Correa empieza a transformar, a cambiar muchas de las leyes en la Constitución, y empezó a demostrar que no tenía la intención, la voluntad de defender la iniciativa Yasuní TT.
So unfortunately, over time, it became obvious that Rafael Correa was beginning to make changes in the constitutional laws, and it became clear that he really did not intend to continue to defend the Yasuní ITT proposal.
Entonces, la respuesta es que la propuesta para enfrentar al capitalismo ya existió. Ya existe. En Ecuador hay muchos ejemplos y procesos, y la iniciativa Yasuní TT era una de esas. Pero muchas veces gana el poder económico, el poder de las corporaciones, y ahora con la transformación global que hay de nuevos poderes, y como tú sabes, el de China está muy presente, pues el petróleo sigue siendo la prioridad en los países de Latinoamérica. Por eso hay tantos conflictos ahora por temas ambientales en Latinoamérica, y sé que en Estados Unidos también.
So the answer is that the proposal was a way to confront the capitalist model. We did try to do it, but in El Salvador,
Ecuador.
I'm sorry. In Ecuador, a lot of people supported the Yasuní ITT proposal, but there are corporate powers and economic powers who oppose that. And there is a global transformation going on with big powers like China, who are very present now. So oil is a big priority in Latin America, and it has led to a lot of conflicts, not only in Latin America, but also in the United States.
Es un tema muy grande para muchas.
It's a big topic.
Yeah, I just think it's like your question had a lot of dimensions. You know, it's either the progressive government in Ecuador and the welfare system that it has created, but also we have to analyze what are the gains of the civil society in Ecuador, and what are the civil society limitations with this progressive government. A lot of us know that the Ecuadorian government became into power. Rafael Correa came into power with a lot of the support of the civil society groups and the left wing of the government. But what happened ever since he started? You know, the criminalization of protests, the expansion of the oil frontier, mining, the irrespect of human rights and the human rights violations in Ecuador, and they closed down the bilingual education system in Ecuador, because the government thinks that through bilingual schools, that's how the indigenous have more access to power. So it's a long issue to analyze, you know, and we have to taking accountability with corporations now. It's not only the U.S., it's not only China, you know, we need to target like the system itself as the capitalist system. It doesn't matter where they come from or what they have their mask from, you know. Ecuador seems to be a very progressive government that is doing a lot of the extremely extremely right-wing governments would do, you know. It's not the mask, it's about like the movements and the people and the investment and how is that affecting the people. And a lot of, a part of your question was like, you know, you kind of using this mentality in which you say, okay, we need to, Ecuador needs to be developed and progress with the people. So that is what other governments say, okay, we need to emit CO2 or do CO2 emissions the same as the first world countries and the time that they take in order to become first world countries and the industrialization, you know, and we're not contributing to climate change. When we talk about climate change, I think there's a thing where you have to start acting now. In a lot of countries, not only Ecuador, and it's okay. On one side, they have the reason. Okay, let's say, okay, now you're telling us that we cannot do CO2 emissions, and because you already done too much. You know, it's not a matter. It's not a matter of who has emitted more or who has contributed more to climate change. It's about doing something right now for the sake of the planet itself. You know, and. That is about climate change. You know, we need to do something about climate change, and we need to like see a way in which can go beyond, you know, the capitalist system that we have been living in, and we know what it's brought us to. You know, that is why we have the discussion right now. That is what we need to do something and take action right now, and about like human rights and like is human rights versus nature, is human rights versus the development of Ecuador, is the nature versus the change of the productive matrix. So it's a lot of there's a lot of things to analyze within this context of progressive governments in Latin America. You know, it's the rights of the people or the progress of the nation. So. And yeah, just that. I think it has a lot of more to be discussed, and it could be like days and hours of just responding to your question, because it's the question that we all have. And I think we have to stop being rhetoric about it. It's more about like take action and do something right now, because we don't have more time for rhetoric. We're moving like 100 years over rhetoric right now, and we need to do something for the planet.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. I wanted to thank everyone for coming, and Gaby in particular for being here with us today.
Thank you.